Alright everybody, welcome back to another Commander Deck Tech. I know it took me a month of Sundays to get the second one up. If you missed our first one, you go back on our YouTube channel and check it out. It was a review of my Mimeoplasm EDH deck. Today, by popular demand, we're going to review my Rafiq of the Mini EDH deck, which is a slightly different take on the way EDH is played, basically. The Mimeoplasm and some of my other decks are decks which you like to have your commander out and you build it around that theme, but you don't necessarily need them to survive. Rafiq is much more of an all-in on your commander type of strategy. So I know from the last video it was a little bit long, actually a lot longer than I had anticipated it being, so I'll try to keep this one to a lot shorter time frame. If you have any questions or anything, I leave anything out, feel free to leave those comments or questions in the chat below, or the comments below I should say, or get in touch with me over on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ZachSellsMagic. So let's pile right into it here. First we see the man of the hour, Rafiq of the Mini. One, and then the Bant colors. He's a 3/3 base, but he does have Exalted. And you read his rules text: whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gains double strike until end of turn. And so that, in and of itself, is what this deck is based around. Rafiq is what we call a Voltron deck. Basically, I'm trying to jam a lot of what turns out to be equipment. You can also use enchantments and whatnot on Rafiq, and basically kind of one-hit your opponents because you only need to get him up to 11 power, and then with his double strike trigger, 10 power and his Exalted trigger, with double strike will kill your opponent one foul swoop. So we'll just go ahead and pile into the cards, like I said. First off, we're going to talk about the mana accelerants and the mana fixers. Obviously, Soul Ring is self-explanatory. Chromatic Lantern, I like to play Chromatic Lantern in any 3-colored deck. And then there's a small Metalcraft theme in here, and basically there's only one card that uses Metalcraft, but we do search for enchantments and artifacts, so it's good to have a card like Lantern. I basically put Lantern in all my 3-color decks. Felwar Stone is another card that I just kind of like having it. It's kind of a weaker weaker Chromatic Lantern, I should say, but it's oftentimes just a 2-mana tap for any color card. Then we have all 3 of the appropriate Bant Signets, which again I like to. I don't usually play in a lot. If I have a base green deck, I don't usually like to play a lot of Artifact Ramp, just because I don't like to get it blown out by Creeping Corrosion or Fracturing Gust or something like that. Use more of these type of cards. Kodama's Reach. I think I'm also playing Cultivate. Yeah, and I am playing Cultivate. But in this deck, like I said, I don't usually like to use the mana rocks, but in this deck, since we can tutor for in artifacts, as we'll see in some other cards, I like to use those as well. So all these cards basically fix your mana, help you ramp. There's some ramp creatures that are also involved a little bit later, but those are basically the core of the deck. Now we'll move into talking about some of the removal. Obviously, Condemn is kind of an auto-include in any white EDH deck, as it's very important to tuck opposing generals. We also have Oblivion Ring as kind of a catch-all. Again, like I said, we will be talking about how we can tutor for artifacts and enchantments, so it's nice to have a permanent that answers anything on the board. And Oblivion Ring does that better than any other card. Then we got Ablation, another auto-include in any white EDH deck. You can tuck your opposing generals and also draw cards if you get in a pinch late in the game by getting rid of one of your unused permanents. Divine Reckoning is the perfect sweeper in this deck because it does have an Exalted sub-theme. Since you are attacking most of the time in an ideal circumstance just with your Rafiq, you don't really care about any of the other creatures except the one that you have. So you're more than welcome to pay 4 mana and get rid of everything else on the board except for your Rafiq, and your Rafiq is oftentimes going to be loaded up with goodies and much better than anybody else's opposing creature that they should save. Also, the fact that you can flash this back is more just gravy than anything else, because one use is usually more than enough, but it is nice that it does have the flashback ability, though it does cost 7. And then we just have a standard Wrath of God. I will mention right now that this is not a deck that I play a ton. It's just a deck. I just wanted to have a deck I could put all the equipment in. So I haven't tuned this one as much as I've tuned some of my other decks. The Mimeoplasm, for example, is very well tuned, and then some other ones that we'll go into in future weeks. So there are some other things you can choose here. You could play a Hallowed Burial. You could play a lot of the other type sweepers. Right now I'm just playing Wrath of God. More just because I had it handy when I put the deck together. Now we'll move into some more of the utility cards. Obviously, you're playing top, have a lot of shuffle effects. Sylvan Library is another auto-include. Again, it is a permanent, and it is an enchantment, so we can tutor for that, as we'll show later. Aristic Seti, it's another auto-include card. It helps you to get a little bit of card advantage. This deck doesn't actually draw a ton of cards. It does have blue in it, but blue is much more of a splash color. It's mostly a green and white deck, so this helps you to kind of eke out some advantage. And then anyone that knows me knows that there's a Mimic Vat in literally every one of my commander decks. It's just a ton of value. you've got a lot of cards in this deck, or creatures I should say, in this deck that have a lot of enter the battlefield triggers, and they just work great with Mimic Vat, not to mention that you can steal other people's creatures as well. So just an all-around good card. Now we'll get into some of the cards that kind of deal with our Rafiq sub-theme of Exalted. So Ardent Plea is basically just an enchantment that gives Exalted, so it does pump your Rafiq. It's one of the weaker cards in the deck. I just like it. If you just want a secret, I just like cascading. So I play it most times when you play this spell. You're going to get another mana rock. So basically for 3 mana, you get a buff, and you also get to ramp your mana usually. So it's just one I play, but you could easily cut this card for a more powerful card. It's just more of a pet card of mine. Finest Hour is one of the biggest blowouts in this entire deck. A lot of times if you cast Rafiq on 4 and then Finest Hour on 5, it will not kill them outright unless you've cast something previously. But Finest Hour does have Exalted, and when a creature attacks alone, you get a second attack phase. So you cast Rafiq on 4, you cast this on 5, then attack with Rafiq. He gets 2 Exalted triggers, so he's 5 base. He has double strike, so it's 10. Then you get a second attack phase. That's another 10. All you need is one point of buff. You know, a Skull Clamp, Noble Hierarch, any other Exalted Ardent Plea on 3. That's a perfect way to kill someone in one foul swoop. Finest Hour does not survive a lot. It is very, very broken in this kind of deck, but it is one of the more powerful cards that you could possibly cast. Dueling Grounds is more of a defensive kind of card, but it also works well with Rafiq. Basically it says you can only attack with 1 creature, which you're fine with, and your opponents can only block with 1 creature. It applies to you as well. Your opponents can only attack with 1 creature, and you can only block with 1 creature, so it is symmetric, but again, you've built your entire deck to take advantage of that, so no big deal. Also, Karmic Justice, I don't know if you guys are playing white EDH decks that don't use Karmic Justice, but I don't know why you wouldn't play it in every one of your deck. Basically, anytime someone destroys a non-creature permanent that you control, you get to destroy a target permanent your opponents control. So, you know, even if they, best case scenario, even if they disenchant this effect, you get to destroy their best permanent. So you get to Vindicate every time. So this just makes, you know, trying to condemn your Rafiq or to, you know, disenchant some of your equipment, it just makes all those things very unfortunate for your opponents. So it gives them a lot of trouble. So I would definitely recommend putting Karmic Justice into any of your white EDH decks if you haven't already. And then Aura Shards is another auto-include in any Selesnya-based deck. You've got tons of creatures, and you obviously want to take advantage of that. Ironically, Aura Shards is one of the cards that does our deck the worst damage. Now we'll go into some of our kind of griefer cards too. I'm playing a main deck Grafdigger's Cage because this deck does not in any way deal with its own graveyard, except for the flashback, I believe, on Divine Reckoning is the only thing. And then Relic of Progenitus. Again, these are artifact answers to graveyard hate-based strategies that you really need to have in your main deck and commander, since abusing your graveyard is the best thing that any commander deck can do. It's the most raw power. Relic of Progenitus and Grafdigger's Cage also help with our Metalcraft theme, but both of these are good answers. And then Eladamri's Call. I'm only playing Eladamri's Call. I probably should be playing a Worldly Tutor because your deck is kind of all in on Rafiq. You can win games without Rafiq by just loading up on another creature, but Rafiq is so much more powerful than any of the other cards in your deck. You probably should be playing as many ways as possible of getting him back should he get tucked away. But Eladamri's Call is the perfect, you know, demonic tutor for creatures, so I am playing that bad boy. And now we'll get into the creature suite itself. Solemn Simulacrum, not really going to explain, he's just a value creature, no more than that. Then I've got 2 other cards, Noble Hierarch. Obviously it's a mana dork, but it does have Exalted and also provides all the mana from your shard, as well as a Birds of Paradise. Now, Hierarch makes a lot of sense in this deck because it has a 2-fold advantage of ramping and Exalted. Birds, you know, not necessarily strong enough for most EDH decks, but your deck is so much stronger casting Rafiq on turn 3 than it is on turn 4. It's monumentally different. So if you can, there's tons of ways with the Signet, with these 2 guys, to ramp into a turn 3 Rafiq and then attack on turn 4. It's definitely worth playing the extra copy of Noble Hierarch in Birds of Paradise. I'm also playing a Void Stalker. It's basically a blue oblation. I just like it to use that to tuck opposing generals. Also, Void Stalker is great because it can carry your equipment. So there's a lot of creature answers in here to things that you can later jam a bunch of swords on and get in for some damage. Phantasmal Image, not real great with our artifact, equipment sub-theme because you can't equip it, but it's a permanent, so cheap. It deals with opposing generals so easily. I just went ahead and played it. Again, this is a card that you might look to cut for something better. And then Phyrexian Metamorph is everything that Phantasmal Image might not be. Metamorph is. You can tutor for it because it is an artifact. You can cast it basically for any mana. Very easy to get on board. You can copy your guys. You can copy an Acidic Slime or Harmonic Sliver. You can copy their general. You can copy the best creature on the field. I don't really know why I spent that much time explaining why Metamorph is a good card in Commander. Then we've got Silent Arbiter. It's another kind of Dueling Grounds effect, basically locking down combat to just one creature on one side and one creature on the other. And again, much like Voidstalker, late game you can put some equipment on this guy and deal the final blows. Gaddock Teague is a very hateful man. We don't have a lot of cards in our deck that Teague really shuts down. Actually, I don't even play Harmonize because I'm so sick of having to Harmonize in my hand and not being able to cast it because of Teague. But basically, he's a perfect kind of answer to a lot of cards and a lot of strategies. You can tutor for him if you need be with Eladamri's Call, and he carries equipment just like everybody else. So, just an all-purpose hate card, much like Quel'Sali Pridemage is, but also has the benefit of being having an Exalted trigger. Haven Mindcensor is just another card that griefs your opponent, not letting them tutor, which obviously is a super strong thing to do in Commander. And it carries equipment well. I'll say that after every creature. Acidic Slime, great to clone, great to get under Mimic Vat, answers pretty much everything, and again carries equipment. And then Phyrexian Revoker, it's kind of fragile, but you can tutor for this, so this is a little bit better than Pithing Needle in my opinion because it can carry equipment, but it does shut things down. Pithing Needle can name lands, but it's not that huge a deal in this deck, but it does give you an out to some activated abilities. Harmonic Sliver, basically another Aura Shards effect. And then finally, the last creature I'm going to talk about, I think it's the last creature in this section, is Sovereigns of Lost Solara, which is basically a one-card combo because it pairs very nicely. It does have Exalted, but it does let you go and get, when it comes into play, and one of your creatures attacks by itself, again on theme with the rest of the deck, you get to go and get an enchantment and put it on that creature, and it just happens to pair very well with Eldrazi Conscription. I know this is nothing new. This was the deck that won Nationals back when it was when Shards was in Standard, but you're in the right colors. It's very easy to jam these two cards into any Bant shell and get the job done. Then we got some creatures that are kind of hard to deal with in terms of blocking, and you get some value off of attacking with the pump and with the equipment-based strategies. So we've got Cold Eye Selkie. It has Island Walk, so it's going to be unblockable a lot. Then you jam equipment on it. You can draw a ton of cards. This guy's very strong. Invisible Stalker, can't block him. He's hexproof. You got to load a lot of stuff on him, but we'll go into some equipment later that makes it very lucrative just to be able to get in for that one hit of unblockable damage. Then we've got Blighted Agent, and this is kind of what I was alluding to when talking about the Stalker. Poison is very effective in Commander until they change the rules. It just takes 10 poison to get rid of your opponent. So you jam a lot of equipment on this guy and they can't block it, and he ends the game very quickly. So there's no point in not playing this guy. And then Mirror Crusader, he already has Double Strike. You put equipment on him, he does twice the damage. Also with these Double Strike creatures, you get 2 activations from your swords and other equipment like that. So, and then like I say, he's tough to block, tough to target, nightmare for some decks. Now we'll get into the equipment sub-package or package or sub-theme, whatever you want to call it. It's the Stoneforge Mystic portion of the deck. So all the equipment and all the things that get the equipment out and help to make that easier to achieve. So Stoneforge basically speaks for itself. It's the best tutor. There's a reason they play it in Legacy. It's a very good card, and it enables you to get a lot of goodies. Stone Hero Giant, and in a lot of ways, is better than Stoneforge Mystic because it's just more powerful. It lets you tutor for the card and then put it onto the battlefield attached to a creature you have. Costs a little bit more mana, but when you get this guy going, it's very brutal. He also has Vigilance, so you can attack with him, then activate him and put equipment on him, and then the same turn, and that's pretty strong. Tajnar Swordsmith, he's got a lot of text, but basically 4 for a 2/3, and then you can pay an extra X mana and then go get an equipment that costs X and put it on the battlefield. So you cast this guy for 7, you can go get a sword and put it on the battlefield. Not equipped like the Stone Hero Giant, but just onto the battlefield, which is still pretty good. And then Pure Steel Paladin, this is the minor Metalcraft theme I was talking about earlier. Pure Steel Paladin basically lets you equip for free. You almost always have Metalcraft in this deck, and I know he's very fragile, but if people are targeting him for removal, like you're more than happy with that because he's not essential to your core strategy. But just the ability to just draw card after card when equipment comes into play, and just swing with the guy and then re-equip all your equipment to another guy to block. It's a very strong card. This is one of my most. I enjoy playing with this card almost more than any other card in this deck. And then Auriok Steel Shaper basically lets you equip for 1 less mana, and then you see a second line of text as long as Auriok Steel Shaper is equipped. Soldiers and knights you control get +1/+1. Rafiq just happens to be a knight, so there is that kind of a cool, unexpected synergy. But again, it's just a dude that can carry some equipment in the late game, and it also helps you load up one creature with a lot of stuff. Then we'll go into some more tutors here. We got Enlightened Tutor. Like I said, all your enchantments, all your artifacts that we talked about earlier, that they're important that they are enchantment and artifacts, you can tutor for with Enlightened Tutor. If you need an O-Ring to get rid of some trouble permanent, you need to get a Phyrexian Metamorph to get rid of somebody's general. All kinds of things that this card can do. Is very flexible. Obviously, you want to be playing this in any equipment-based deck. Steel Shaper's Gift is the exact same thing, except that it puts it into your hand, and you can only get equipment, but still it's super relevant. And then one of the most powerful cards actually in this deck is in fact Wargate, and that's the reason why a lot of my cards are permanents, like I said, because you can tutor for them with Wargate. And then you can even tutor for lands too. There's many a time I have gone and gotten a specific land by just casting this for 3. It's just very strong. You can get a creature when you need a creature. You can get an enchantment when you need equipment when you need an equipment. You can get removal type thing like an O-Ring as well if you need that, or you can get a land if you need to fix your mana, or you need to ramp or something like that. So Wargate is super strong. I would play this in any Bant deck regardless of the sub-theme, but it just works out really good here. And now we'll go into the equipment. Obviously we got Lightning Greaves, help protect Rafiq, as well as Swiftfoot Boots. Both are pretty obvious inclusions. Also have a Skull Clamp. Skull Clamp's kind of important. It's not as good in this deck, but it does give you some incremental value if they do get rid of you've got 5 equipment on guy, they're going to try and get rid of it. Skull Clamp gives you a little bit of value when they inevitably do that. But also it's important to have one piece of equipment that costs 1, just so when you're using your Tajnar Swordsmith, you can go and get something that costs 1, because sometimes you just don't have the mana to do anything else. Trailblazer's Boots is a really interesting card because I used to play Whisper Soak Cloak, and it just doesn't work at all the way you want it to. Unblockable is great, but you have to sequence things correctly because it gives your creature Shroud, and then you can't equip them anymore, and God forbid you draw another equipment that you want to put on it after you've already equipped it. You have to have 2 creatures, and it's just very tedious. Trailblazer's Boots basically says target creature is unblockable, because everyone, even the budget EDH decks, are playing some kind of non-basic land. It costs 2 to equip and 2 to cast, but 2 to equip is very crucial. There's a big difference between equipment that costs 2 to equip and cards that cost 3 or more to equip in terms of how well they play in an actual game state. So Trailblazer's Boots, if you're not using it and you have an EDH deck that's thematics revolve around getting through with one specific creature, I'd give it a try. It's worked out well for me. Plus the art's pretty cool. I like it in the card block. A Darksteel Plate again is pretty self-explanatory. Make your dude indestructible. Now let's talk swords. Basically, I put this entire deck together because I wanted to have like 4 swords on one guy. I wanted to have all 5 swords on one guy, but ultimately it turned out that one of them wasn't really good enough in my opinion. Sword of War and Peace is the weakest sword. Basically, you're just getting it for its pro-white and pro-red abilities, but sometimes the gaining life is usually not relevant, but sometimes if you have a double strike creature like Rafiq or Mirran Crusader, the double Stormseeker effect from the red part of the sword is enough to kill somebody. Sword of Fire and Ice is one I tutor for a lot. It's basically spot removal, also helps you draw a ton of cards, and again with double strike you draw 2 cards and deal 4 damage. Sword of Light and Shadow, the white part, gaining life, not that important, and you do have to, I lied I guess when I said it doesn't really deal with your graveyard, the deck in general, but it rarely deals with your graveyard. But you can get back some utility creatures. If you used a clone effect to kill a commander, you can get that back. But again, just pro-white and pro-black, often what you use this for. And then obviously the best sword in this deck most times ends up being the Sword of Feast and Famine. The pro-green and pro-black are almost always important. Green is a very popular color in Commander, so that's always very important. Being able to tap your lands is huge. And then making your opponent discard is just a great novelty. And again, with double strike, you get to make them discard 2 cards. There's not a lot of advantage in this deck to untap lands twice during combat because you don't have a lot of instants, but I mean, you're obviously going to play this card. Arginum Armor is just a great commander card. You know, there's the standard deck that used it with Quest of the Holy Relic. Maybe I should have Quest of the Holy Relic in this deck. I didn't really think about that until just now. Don't have a lot of creatures, so it might not be that good. But Arginum Armor, you know, if you attack with a creature that's equipped to, it's a instant Vindicate. You have things like Pure Steel Paladin and Auriok Steel Shaper to help you get around that 6 to equip cost, but games go long, so you can usually take advantage of this guy. So super good, answering a lot of things. And then let's talk about briefly Grafted Exoskeleton. The majority of your games, if you're trying to win, you do have some tutoring in this, so you can kind of mold your game around how competitive you want to be. You can go for the really aggressive instant kills if you want to, or you can just get some fun cards if you want the game to be a little bit more casual. But if you're really trying to go for the jugular, Grafted Exoskeleton is essential, and I'd say I win the game with this card well over half the time. Basically, again, it's another card that costs 2 to equip. You put this card on Rafiq, and he kills immediately. That's all you need to know. 10 infect damage in 1 foul swoop. The fact that when you have to remove their equipment, the creature dies is almost never relevant because you're never going to take it off a creature because it's usually lethal. Like I said, there's a lot of strategies in Commander that revolve around infect, and the infect equipment is obviously super well placed in this deck. So that guy right there, you may not be familiar with him. It is a Scars of Meridian uncommon, very strong card in any deck that is looking to kill people with their commander by themselves. Now we'll go into the lands quite briefly. Inkmoth Nexus is pretty important because it does have infect, and you can load up all your equipment on it. It's very tough to deal with. Some decks can't get rid of it, and you can Wargate for 0 and get Inkmoth Nexus, so you can kind of surprise people in that regard. Then we got Cathedral of War, just another utility land, giving Rafiq or whatever creature another exalted trigger. And then we have Iganjo Castle, or Ganyo Castle, however you want to pronounce it. But basically it helps you prevent 2 damage against Rafiq. Doesn't really I'm going to be honest to you, I don't know if I've activated this more than a half dozen times in my life. But you might as well play it. There's really no reason not to. They got Horizon Canopy for a little bit of card advantage in the late game. Thespian Stage just seems like an all-around good card to have in every EDH deck. Temple of the False Gods, kind of an auto include. I've got all 3 of the cycling lands, because why would you not play them? And I've got a Command Tower. These are into the fixing lands now. We're out of the utility. Reflecting Pool, Rupture Spire, all of these are self-explanatory. I've got both the Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds. I've got the Bant Tri-Land from Shards of Alara and Seaside Citadel, and then I've got a couple M10 duels and Straggler Refuge Land for whatever reason, because I haven't put my actual dual lands in this deck. I keep them, I don't know, I just never bothered. Like I said, I don't play with this deck all that much, but just some mana fixing. And then a crap ton of Zendikar Full Art lands, which I'm sure you really don't need me to explain. So that is it. That is the Rafiq of the Many EDH deck in a nutshell. Like I said, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, anything like that, either get in touch with me on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ZachSellsMagic. You can follow me on Twitter at ZachSellsMagic is my screen name there, or you can leave the comments just below in the comments section. Like I said, this is by no means the official Rafiq list. I know it's a very popular general, and there's a lot of different strategies, and I'm sure there are tons of automatic cards that I should have in this deck that I don't have it. But that's the fun of Commander. Everybody can have a different take on the same archetype. So, like I said, get in touch with me if you have anything you'd like to say about the deck. And then in a couple weeks, we'll be back with another EDH video. So, thanks for watching, and we'll check you later.